The control center on the 23rd floor of the TechCorp Tower was a symphony of quiet, expensive panic. It was a room built to project an image of absolute futuristic control, a cavern of brushed steel, smoked glass, and cool blue light. One entire wall was a seamless panoramic screen, a digital god's eye view of the company's global logistics network. But tonight, the god was bleeding. Every screen, every monitor, every tablet in the room was flashing a single, stark, and catastrophic word in a furious pulsing red: system failure. For 3 agonizing hours, the system had been down, not just slow, not just buggy, but completely and utterly dead. The revolutionary AI-driven logistics algorithm that was the heart of TechCorp's entire operation, the engine that moved millions of dollars in goods for dozens of international clients every single hour, had crashed, and it had taken the entire company, and a significant portion of their clients' businesses, down with it. The air in the room was thick with the smell of burnt coffee, ozone, and the faint, animal scent of fear. 20 of the company's best and brightest engineers, men with degrees from MIT and Stanford and 6-figure salaries, were gathered around the central console, their faces pale and drawn in the demonic red glow of the warning screens. They spoke in low, desperate murmurs, their usual cocksure arrogance replaced by a rising tide of helpless terror. They were the high priests of this technological temple, and their god had just died on the altar. If you're as smart as you think you are, then fix it. Now, the voice of Michael Harrison, TechCorp's chief technology officer, was a whipcrack, sharp and vicious, cutting through the tense, hushed atmosphere. He was pacing back and forth like a caged tiger, his handsome, patrician face a mask of pure, uncontrolled rage. Into this maelstrom of corporate meltdown, Kesha Williams walked like a ghost. She was there to deliver the lunch Michael had angrily ordered through a food delivery app an hour ago, a sad collection of cold sandwiches and lukewarm sodas that was meant to fuel the all-night effort to resurrect their fallen god. Her thermal backpack, a bright, cheerful green that was a flagrant violation of the room's cool blue and furious red aesthetic, was still slung over her shoulder. She was 24 years old, and her life was a world away from this temple of technology. Her world was one of cracked sidewalks, late rent notices, and the constant, grinding anxiety of a life lived on the financial precipice. She was, by all outward appearances, just another cog in the city's vast, invisible service machine. She placed the order on a side table, her movements quiet and efficient, but as she turned to leave, her eyes were drawn to the massive screen on the wall. It was covered in a frantic, chaotic scroll of error codes and diagnostic readouts, and in the midst of that chaos, she saw it. It was not a subtle bug, not a hidden flaw. To her, it was a glaring, screaming, fundamental error in the system's core architecture, as obvious and as out of place as a hippopotamus in a china shop. "Sorry," she said, the word a quiet, almost involuntary murmur, "but that error, it's being caused by a cache memory conflict." The room fell silent. 20 engineers, men who controlled a multi-billion-dollar global network, stopped what they were doing and turned to stare at her. They looked at the young black woman in the food delivery uniform, at the thermal backpack on her shoulder, at the quiet, unassuming confidence in her eyes, and they looked at her as if she had just sprouted a second head and started speaking in ancient Sumerian. "You tried to reboot the primary server without clearing the pending transaction buffer," she continued, her voice still quiet, but now infused with a strange, unnerving authority. "The residual data in the cache is creating a logical loop. It's a classic rookie mistake." The silence that followed was profound, absolute, and deeply, deeply humiliating. It was the silence of 20 of the most highly trained, highly paid engineers in the world being confronted with the undeniable, irrefutable fact that a food delivery girl had just identified, in the space of 10 seconds, a problem that they had been unable to solve for 3 excruciating hours. Michael Harrison was the first to recover. He let out a laugh. It was not a sound of humor. It was a sharp, ugly, barking sound, a pure expression of his own wounded, incredulous ego. "Very funny," he sneered, his voice dripping with a thick, poisonous condescension. "The cavalry has arrived. I bet you didn't even finish high school. How about you take your $5 tip, go back to your deliveries, and leave the real work to the people who actually understand it?" A few of the other engineers chuckled along with him, a wave of nervous, relieved laughter. The natural order of the world had been momentarily disrupted, but their leader, their alpha, was now firmly re-establishing the hierarchy. David Park, the senior engineer, a man with a PhD from Stanford, and a deep-seated belief in his own intellectual superiority, crossed his arms. "Gah," he said, The word a casual, dismissive insult. This isn't like fixing a broken microwave. This is a complex, distributed infrastructure system that moves millions of dollars a minute. Kesha stood motionless, her brown eyes maintaining a calm that was a stark, jarring contrast to the frantic, chaotic energy of the room. There was something in that look, a quiet, almost dangerous serenity, that suggested she knew something they didn't. It was the look of a person who was not a participant in this drama, but an observer, a scientist watching a particularly fascinating and predictable chemical reaction. "All right," she replied, her voice soft, but carrying a strange new weight. She adjusted the strap of her backpack. "But when you find out that I'm right, and when your system is back up and running in exactly 2 minutes after you follow my suggestion, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember the moment you chose to trust your prejudice, instead of your own eyes." Michael Harrison let out another loud, exaggerated, braying laugh. 2 minutes. Honey, that system has been down for 3 hours. We have a team of 20 experts, the best in the world, trying to fix it. And you really think that a food delivery girl is going to teach us something? Kesha smiled slightly. It was not a smile of amusement. It was not a smile of anger. It was a smile that did not reach her eyes, but that carried a weight, a history, a power that made some of the men in that room feel an inexplicable, deeply uncomfortable chill. It was the smile of someone who was guarding a secret too powerful, too dangerous, to be revealed before the time was absolutely, perfectly right. 3 days passed. 3 days during which Michael Harrison could not get that moment out of his head. The humiliation of it was a constant, burning coal. In the pit of his stomach, she had been right. Of course, she had been right. After she had left, after a few more minutes of fruitless, panicked debate, they had, in a fit of pure desperation, tried her suggestion. They had cleared the transaction buffer. They had rebooted the primary server, and the system had come back online in exactly 2 minutes. The silence in the control center then had been even more profound, more humiliating, than the silence that had followed her initial diagnosis. Michael Harrison, a man with a degree from MIT, 15 years of experience in the tech industry, and a $200,000 a year salary, had been publicly, comprehensively, and unforgivably outsmarted by a delivery girl, and he was not the kind of man who could let that stand. "I got her name," David Park said, striding into Michael's office with a smug, mischievous smile. He dropped a single sheet of paper on Michael's desk. "Kesha Williams, 24 years old, works for 3 different delivery apps, lives on the east side of town, in the projects." He paused dramatically, savoring the moment. "And here's the interesting part. She dropped out of the computer science program at the state university in her 3rd year." Michael raised his eyebrows, a flicker of genuine interest cutting through his anger. "Dropped out? Why?" "Apparently," David said, his voice dripping with condescension, "she couldn't pay her tuition. Low-income family, couldn't afford her education. It's a typical story. Someone who dreams too big, who doesn't have the structure to support her ambitions." What Michael Harrison didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was the real story. He didn't know that Kesha had been forced to drop out of college not because of a lack of ability, or of ambition, or of intellect, but because of a family tragedy that had shattered her world. He didn't know that her mother, a woman who had worked 2 jobs her entire life to give her daughter a chance at a better future, had been diagnosed with a rare, aggressive form of cancer in the middle of Kesha's junior year. He didn't know that Kesha had been faced with an impossible choice: continue her studies, or drop out to work and pay for the experimental, life-saving medical treatments that her mother's insurance wouldn't cover. The choice, for her, had been obvious. For the past 2 years, she had lived a double life. By day, she worked 3 different, grueling low-wage jobs, delivering food, cleaning offices, stocking shelves, anything to pay the mounting pile of medical bills. But by night, in the quiet, pre-dawn hours, she studied. A desk was a cardboard box in the corner of the small 1-bedroom apartment she shared with her ailing mother. Her computer lab was a second-hand, refurbished laptop she had bought with borrowed money. She had taught herself to code, devouring online tutorials, academic papers, and open-source projects with a ferocious, single-minded determination. She had turned her grief, her frustration, her quiet, simmering rage at the injustice of the world, into fuel. "You know what really bothers me?" Michael continued, turning his chair to look out at the panoramic 23rd floor view of the city, a view that confirmed his own importance. "It's the arrogance. People like her, they think they can just walk into our world and talk to us as equals. She doesn't understand that there's a hierarchy, a natural order of things. David laughed, sharing the same comfortable, unexamined mindset. Exactly. I bet she just memorized a few lines of code from some internet forum. It was beginner's luck, nothing more. What they didn't know was that Kesha, in her spare time, in the quiet moments between her 3 jobs and caring for her mother, had developed, on her own, a route optimization system for delivery drivers that was more efficient, more elegant, and more advanced than anything the so-called experts at TechCorp had ever created. She had turned her own desperate need to survive into a learning opportunity, creating algorithms that maximized her earnings and minimized her work time with a brutal, beautiful efficiency. The following Thursday, Michael Harrison decided it was time to re-establish the natural order of things. It was time to put the cocky, impertinent delivery girl back in her place. He made a series of phone calls. He used his influence, his power as the CTO of one of the city's largest corporate clients, to make a special, personal request to the supervisors of every major food delivery app in the city. He wanted Kesha Williams banned. He fabricated a story of inappropriate behavior, of disrespect towards customers. As the chief technology officer of a major corporation, he had lied, his voice a smooth, convincing instrument of power. I cannot allow our employees to be subjected to the services of disrespectful, unprofessional, and potentially unstable individuals. In less than 24 hours, Kesha received 3 notifications on her phone. Her account had been suspended on all 3 of the apps she used for work. There was no detailed explanation. There was no right to an appeal. There was just a cold, digital severance. Her only source of income was gone. Sitting in her small, cramped kitchen, staring at the growing pile of her mother's medical bills on the table, Kesha felt a mixture of white-hot anger and a cold, hard determination she had not experienced in a very long time. Her hands trembled slightly as she reread the suspension messages. But it was not fear that caused the tremor. It was the feeling of a powerful engine, long dormant, finally roaring to life. "Honey, what's wrong?" her mother, Helen, asked, entering the kitchen with the slow, pained movements of someone still recovering from her latest round of chemotherapy. "Nothing, Mom," Kesha said, her voice a calm, steady reassurance. She hugged her mother gently, feeling the fragility of the body that had fought so hard, for so long, to stay alive. "Just a small problem at work. I'll take care of it." She looked at her mother, at the lines of pain and worry etched on her face, and she made a silent, solemn promise. "I'll fix everything." That night, Kesha turned on her old, refurbished laptop, and she began to code. But this time, she wasn't building a route optimization algorithm. She wasn't solving a simple logic problem. This time, she was building something much more ambitious. She was building a weapon. Every line of code she wrote was fueled by a lifetime of humiliation, of being underestimated, of doors being slammed in her face. Michael Harrison, in his petty, vindictive arrogance, had just awakened something in her that he could never have imagined. He had awakened the silent, righteous fury of someone who had been pushed too far, of someone who had been underestimated her entire life, and who had finally, irrevocably, decided to prove her worth. For a moment, when she had read the suspension messages, Kesha had hung her head, the familiar, crushing weight of injustice settling upon her. But anyone who knew her true story, anyone who had seen the fire in her eyes, would have known that she was not bowing in defeat. She was simply gathering her strength, like a storm that forms silently, invisibly, over a calm sea, before unleashing its full, devastating, and transformative power. For the next 2 weeks, Kesha Williams lived a double reality. By day, she was a desperate, unemployed young woman, pounding the pavement, searching for new jobs, squealing waitressing, stocking shelves, anything that would pay the bills and keep her mother's treatments going. She endured the pitying looks, the condescending questions, the endless, soul-crushing rejections. But by night, she was someone else entirely. She was a warrior, a programmer, an architect of a beautiful, elegant, and devastatingly effective plan. In the quiet pre-dawn hours, while the city slept, she sat at her makeshift desk, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her mind a whirlwind of logic and code. "Honey, you've hardly slept," her mother, Helen, would say, her voice filled with a mixture of concern and a deep, quiet pride. "What is this project that has consumed you?" "It's something that's going to change our lives, Mom," Kesha would reply, a small, dangerous smile on her lips. "Trust me, a tech corp." Meanwhile, Michael Harrison was celebrating his victory. During a meeting with his team, he couldn't resist telling the story as if it were a hilarious anecdote. Remember that delivery girl? He laughed, leaning back in his expensive chair. The one who thought she was a programmer? Well, let's just say she won't be bothering us anymore. I used my contacts, made sure she's blacklisted from every delivery app in the city. David Park, his loyal second-in-command, roared with laughter. Perfect, he said. She needed to learn that there's a natural hierarchy in this world. People like us don't take insults from people like her. What they didn't know was that Jennifer Chen, a senior programmer on their team, a quiet, brilliant Asian woman who had endured her own share of Michael's condescension, was discreetly recording their entire conversation on her phone. She had been the only one to defend Kesha on that fateful day, and she had been quickly, brutally silenced by her colleagues. Now, hearing Michael openly, gleefully admit to ruining an innocent person's life out of pure wounded ego, she felt a cold, hard resolve settle in her own heart. She had to act. That same night, Jennifer did something that could have cost her her job, her career. She tracked Kesha down through a university alumni network and sent her a private, encrypted message. Hi Kesha, I'm Jennifer Chen. I work at TechCorp. I was there the day you solved our system problem. I need to tell you some things about what Michael Harrison did to you. Can we talk? When Kesha received the message, she was initially suspicious. It could be a trap, but something in the sincerity of Jennifer's words, in the shared experience of being an underestimated woman in a world of arrogant men, made her agree to meet. They met at a discreet, out-of-the-way coffee shop in the city. Santa, he really did that? Kesha asked, her voice a low, incredulous whisper. After listening to the recording of the meeting where Michael had bragged about sabotaging her career, worse, Jennifer replied, her eyes flashing with a quiet, righteous indignation. He's bragging about it. Michael Harrison is a classic narcissist. He can't stand to be corrected by anyone, but to be corrected by a young black woman. It was a wound to his ego that he could not tolerate. He did this out of pure, petty spite. Jennifer slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a list of names and contact information. These, she said, are the contact details for all of Tech major corporate clients, the companies that rely on their systems for their most critical operations. If someone, she paused, a slow, strategic smile spreading across her face, could prove to them that Michael Harrison is making critical technical decisions based not on competence, but on his own personal racist biases. Kesha took the paper, her hands trembling slightly. Why are you helping me? She asked. You don't even know me. Because I've been where you are. Jennifer sighed. 3 years ago, Michael tried to have me fired after I corrected a major mistake he made in a presentation to our biggest investors. The only difference is that I had the protection of my seniority, and a very good lawyer. You didn't have that. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Kesha's. But maybe, she said, we can create our own. That night, Kesha worked with a new, ferocious energy. She was no longer just building a system, she was building a trap. Her project had evolved into something far more ambitious, far more dangerous. It was a security vulnerability analysis platform, a digital ghost that could scan any corporate system and identify its critical flaws in real time. But the real genius of her plan lay in what she had discovered during her own sleepless nights of research. TechCorp itself, the company that sold security and stability to the world, was a house of cards. Its own systems were riddled with critical vulnerabilities, flaws that Michael and his vaunted team of 20 expert engineers had either failed to detect or had been too arrogant to fix. Flaws that she, with her hungry, brilliant mind, had mapped out completely. Over the next week, Kesha, with Jennifer's inside help, began to implement the first phase of her plan. She created a series of fake social media profiles, building a convincing online persona for a freelance cybersecurity expert named Kesha Williams. She began to connect with the CTOs and chief technology officers at TechCorp's top client companies. Her strategy was elegant in its simplicity. She offered free, no-strings-attached security audits, nothing illegal, nothing unethical, just a talented, hungry young woman offering her services to identify the very vulnerabilities that could put their companies at risk. What these companies didn't know was that many of the vulnerabilities Kesha Williams would find in their systems came directly from the flawed, insecure, and poorly designed products and services that had been sold to them by TechCorp. How's the project going? Helen asked one evening, watching her daughter, who, for the first time in months, seemed relaxed, almost happy. Better than I ever expected. Mum, Kesha smiled. Much, much better. It was no longer the smile of a desperate young woman trying to survive. It was the smile of a general who was about to win a war. At that same moment, across town, Michael Harrison received the first of many phone calls that would change his life forever. The CTO of Megacorp, one of TechCorp's largest and most important clients, was on the line, his voice a cold, furious thunder. Michael, we need to talk. Urgently. We've just received an independent security report that shows critical, catastrophic flaws in all of the systems you implemented for us. Flaws that you personally assured us did not exist. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. There must be some mistake, Mr. Rodriguez. Our systems have passed every internal security check. The report, Mr. Rodriguez continued, his voice dripping with ice, is from a security expert named Kesha Williams. Do you know her? The phone almost slipped out of Michael's slick, sweating hand. Kesha Williams, the delivery girl, the ghost. She was back, and apparently she wasn't delivering food anymore. Michael, are you still there? Yes, he stammered. Yes, I'll look into it right away. When Michael hung up the phone, his hands were shaking. It wasn't fear that caused the tremor. Not yet. It was the dawning, sickening realization that maybe, just maybe, he had seriously, catastrophically underestimated the quiet, invisible woman he had so carelessly, so cruelly, tried to destroy. But what he didn't know yet, what he couldn't possibly comprehend, was that this phone call was only the first shot in a carefully orchestrated, brilliantly executed campaign. Kesha wasn't just attacking a single TechCorp client, she was preparing a systematic, public, and utterly devastating expose that would reveal years of technical negligence, of decisions based on prejudice, of a profound, systemic incompetence that was masquerading as authority. While Michael Harrison struggled to understand how a simple delivery girl had gained access to such detailed, damning information, Kesha was already 3 steps ahead, implementing the second phase of a plan that would turn his public humiliation into a lesson that Michael Harrison, and the entire tech world, would never ever forget. The game was and the woman he had tried to break was about to break him. The phone call from Megacorp was not an isolated incident. It was the first tremor before the earthquake. Over the next 48 hours, Michael Harrison's world began to systematically unravel. The calls came one after another, a relentless, cascading series of disasters. Dataflow Industries, Omni Global Solutions, Apex Logistics. One by one, TechCorp's biggest clients were calling their voices a chorus of cold, furious disbelief. Each of them had been contacted by the mysterious cybersecurity consultant, Kesha Williams. Each of them had received a free, devastatingly thorough security audit, and each of them had discovered that the expensive, state-of-the-art systems they had bought from TechCorp were as secure as a screen door on a submarine dock. By Monday morning, Michael Harrison arrived at the office to find his secretary, a woman who usually greeted him with a mixture of fear and fawning admiration, looking at him with pale-faced terror. Mr. Harrison, she stammered, we've had 12 contract cancellations in the last 24 hours. They're all citing the same reason, critical security flaws identified by an independent audit. Michael felt the floor drop out from under him. 12 contracts. It was nearly 60% of TechCorp's annual revenue. What audit? Who authorized this? He demanded, his voice a ragged whisper. No one authorized it, sir, she replied, handing him a stack of urgent messages. A consultant offered free security reviews to our clients, and, well, they accepted. His phone rang. It was Richard Goldman, the CEO of Dataflow Industries, a man with whom Michael played golf every other weekend. Michael, Goldman's voice, was not the friendly tone of a golfing buddy, but the cold, hard voice of a man who had just been betrayed. I am canceling our contract, effective immediately. This Kesha Williams found vulnerabilities in your system that you personally assured me, on the 18th green no less, did not exist. Even worse, she provided us with system logs that prove you've known about some of these flaws for months and have done nothing. Richard, there must be a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Michael, Goldman cut him off, was my trusting you. You have exposed my company to catastrophic financial and reputational risk, and you lied about it. We're done. Michael hung up the phone, his hands shaking. Kesha Williams had access to TechCorp's internal logs. How was that possible? The answer came in the form of a company-wide email. It was from Jennifer Chen. The subject line read, Transparency and Integrity, a necessary conversation. Dear colleagues, the email began. As an employee of this company for 5 years, I feel a professional and moral obligation to share some information that affects our collective integrity. The email went on to detail, in calm, precise, and devastating language, how Michael Harrison, had used his position to sabotage the career of Kesha Williams out of pure, personal prejudice. It included a link to the audio recording of the meeting, where Michael had openly bragged about having her blacklisted. Ms. Kesha Williams, Jennifer wrote, identified a critical multi-million-dollar problem in our systems in a matter of seconds. Our company's response, led by our CTO, was to publicly humiliate her and then privately destroy her livelihood. Meanwhile, the very same vulnerabilities she could have helped us fix had been left unaddressed, costing our clients, and our company, millions of dollars in security breaches over the past few months. Within 15 minutes, the email had spread throughout the company like a virus. Within 30 minutes, it had been leaked to the tech press. Within an hour, every major tech website in the country was running the story. Michael burst into Jennifer's office, his face a mask of purple rage. "You're fired," he screamed. "How dare you defame me like this?" "Actually," a calm voice said from the doorway, "she's protected by federal whistleblower laws, and you, Mr. Harrison, are in very, very serious trouble." It was Kesha. She was standing in the doorway, flanked by two sharp-looking lawyers in expensive suits. She was not wearing a delivery uniform. She was wearing a tailored, dark blue power suit that made her look like she owned the building. She was carrying a laptop and a folder full of documents. "Surprise," she said, a serene, almost pitying smile on her face. "I'm here to conduct that security audit you insisted I wasn't capable of performing." Michael choked, a strangled, gurgling sound. You can't be here. "Security, call security." "I didn't break in," Michael. Kesha replied calmly. "I was officially hired by TechCorp's board of directors this morning to conduct a full independent audit of your department, following certain revelations about systematic negligence and potential malfeasance." She nodded towards the two lawyers. "This is Jessica Chen and Michael Richardson. They represent me, and as of this morning, a growing number of your former clients, the journalists, who had been alerted by an anonymous tip from Jennifer, now swarmed into the office, their cameras flashing, their microphones extended. "Mr. Harrison," one of them shouted, "is it true that you used your corporate influence to sabotage the career of a qualified black engineer simply because she corrected you in public?" Michael looked around desperately. Jennifer was smiling discreetly. David Park had vanished into his office. The other employees were watching the scene unfold through the glass partitions, their faces a mixture of shock, horror, and a kind of grim, vengeful satisfaction. That's a misunderstanding." Michael Stammered.Kesha opened her laptop. "I can show you exactly what I found on TechCorp systems," she announced to the assembled press. 23 critical vulnerabilities that should have been patched months ago. Flaws that have cost this company's clients at least $400 million in potential losses. The screen showed a series of detailed reports, error codes, system logs, refutable, undeniable evidence of profound technical negligence. "The interesting part," Kesha continued, her voice calm and authoritative, "is that these flaws were not complex. They were easily identifiable. Any competent first-year programmer would have spotted them during a basic routine review." Michael felt the blood drain from his face. "Our systems, they passed all the internal checks." "Your checks," Kesha said, her voice now as cold and as sharp as a diamond, "were superficial and incompetent. You prioritized speed of implementation and the appearance of progress over actual security. That is exactly the kind of decision someone would make if they were more concerned with protecting their own ego than with doing their job properly." Jessica Chen, Kesha's lawyer, stepped forward. "Mr. Harrison," she said, "my client is considering lawsuits for defamation, intentional interference with contractual relations, and racial discrimination. The evidence we have is, I believe the legal term is, a slam dunk, and the customers who have been affected by your department's technical negligence," she added, a predatory smile on her face, "are currently organizing a class action lawsuit against TechCorp. Their estimated losses already exceed $800 million. Michael slumped into his chair. In less than a week, he had lost most of his clients, the trust of his team, his reputation, and now, he was facing a mountain of lawsuits that would not only destroy his career, but would likely bankrupt him personally. He asked, his voice a broken whisper. He looked at Kesha, at the woman he had dismissed as a simple delivery girl, and for the first time he saw her. He saw the brilliance, the strength, the quiet, unshakable power. You could have just moved on. Kesha closed her laptop and looked him straight in the eye. "Because someone needed to show you," she said, "that competence has no color, no social class, and no gender. And because people like you, Michael, people who are drunk on their own power and privilege, only learn when the consequences are too big, too public, and too painful to ignore. As she left the room, followed by her legal team and the swarm of journalists, Michael Harrison remained alone in his office, a king in a fallen kingdom, finally, truly understanding that he had not just underestimated a delivery girl, he had underestimated the righteous, devastating power of a woman who had turned a lifetime of injustice into fuel for a revenge as elegant, as precise, and as beautiful as a perfectly written line of code. 6 months later, Kesha Williams sat in her own corner office, on the 21st floor of a gleaming corporate building, watching the city lights twinkle to life as the sun set. The sign on the door read, Secure Code Solutions K. Williams, CEO her company, which she had started with the settlement money from her lawsuit against TechCorp, and a significant investment from a consortium of their former clients, had grown from a one-woman operation into one of the most respected and sought-after cybersecurity consulting firms in the country. We have 17 new contracts this month, Jennifer Chen, now the company's chief operating officer, said, entering the room with a stack of proposals. 3 of them are former TechCorp clients who came to us specifically after seeing your work. Kesha smiled. It was not a smile of satisfaction at her revenge. It was the smile of someone who had turned her pain into purpose, her humiliation into a motivation to build something bigger, more ethical, and more successful than anyone could have imagined. And how, Kesha asked, though she already knew the answer, is our beloved former company doing? Michael was fired last week, Jennifer replied. TechCorp has lost 80% of its corporate clients in the last 6 months. They're considering filing for bankruptcy. She paused. He's suing some of the former clients for breach of contract, but no one is taking him seriously. I hear he's trying to work as a freelance consultant, but no one trusts him, Kesha finished. Interesting how reputation works, isn't it? It takes years to build, and only a few, well-documented seconds of bigotry to destroy. Michael Harrison had discovered, the hard way, that competence was not, in fact, determined by a degree from MIT or the color of one's skin. After being fired from TechCorp, he had desperately tried to rebuild his career, but Jennifer's recording of him admitting to sabotaging Kesha out of pure prejudice had gone viral in the insular, interconnected world of the tech community. The companies that had once fought over his services now avoided any association with his name. His former colleagues, the same men who had laughed at his racist jokes, now pretended not to know him at professional events. David Park had even sent out a public statement, distancing himself from Michael's discriminatory attitudes and unprofessional conduct. You know what the most ironic part is? Helen, Kesha's mother, said, entering the office with a tray of tea. Her health had improved dramatically since they were able to afford the best medical care in the country. That man tried to destroy you because he thought you weren't worthy of being on his level. Now you're so far above him, he can't even see you. Kesha hugged her mother affectionately. It was never about levels, Mum. It was about proving that talent has no color, no social class, and no origin story. And that sometimes, when the system fails to protect us, we have to build our own justice. The phone rang. It was an invitation to be the keynote speaker at the National Technology Conference, the same event where Michael Harrison had been one of the featured speakers for 5 years in a row. This year, his name was not even on the guest list. I'm going to accept, Kesha told Jennifer, and I want to talk about how real diversity in technology isn't just a matter of social inclusion, but of technical excellence. I want to talk about how many problems could be solved, how many disasters could be averted, if companies would just stop underestimating people based on their appearances. Meanwhile, across town, Michael Harrison opened yet another rejection letter for a job opening. His bank account was nearly empty. His luxury apartment had been sold to pay off his mounting legal debts, and he now lived in a small, dingy studio in the suburbs. For the first time in his privileged, entitled life, Michael Harrison was experiencing what it meant to be judged, not by his potential, but by his actions. And the consequences were far more devastating than anything he had ever done to Kesha. The best revenge, Kesha had learned, was not in destroying the man who had hurt her. It was in building something so extraordinary, so successful, and so fundamentally good, that he was forced to realize just how small, how petty, and how utterly insignificant he had been when he had tried to diminish her. A year after that fateful day at TechCorp, Kesha had proven Michael right about one thing. There really was a natural hierarchy in the world, but it wasn't based on skin color, or social background, or where someone went to school. It was based on competence, on integrity, and on the quiet, unshakable courage to fight for justice when the world tries to silence you. Secure Code Solutions now employed 45 people, including many of the talented professionals who had been underestimated and overlooked by traditional companies. Kesha had created not just a business, but a movement, a testament to the idea that diversity and technical excellence go hand-in-hand. Michael Harrison had tried to destroy a food delivery girl because he couldn't accept that she was smarter than him. He had ended up losing everything, and had unwittingly created one of the most innovative and successful new technology companies in the country. Kesha had learned that true victory isn't about making your enemies suffer, it's about achieving such extraordinary success that they are forced to realize that they were always too small, too blind, to ever truly understand your greatness.